Alright guys, HyDra back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Dashy's given some interesting perspectives on the level of practice the teams are expected to do in the current state of the CDL. Dashy reckons that actually less practice would be better for the majority of teams. Is Dashy just saying this because he wants to do less work, or does he actually have a good point here and OpTic and other teams should think about restructuring their practice regime to do less work but higher quality work? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Another quality tweet here from Simp. This guy simply does not miss. Also, a bit of drama was going down. We saw the other day Crimsix Ghost was being thrown around as the greatest peak performance player ever. Quite interesting just because, well, Pred was talking about this, Kenny was talking about this, he'd asked other players, Slasher, Accuracy and others, and they'd pretty much all said that played Crim back then. Yeah, he was the Terminator, you couldn't kill Crim, and to be honest, end of Black Ops 2, Ghost Crimsix was mega, but usually when this is thrown around, people say, oh, Advanced Warfare Scump, or even like Black Ops 3 Scump, late Infinite Warfare Scump was insane as well, but certainly Infinite Warfare Formal, those are kind of like the all-time peaks that go around. Ghost Crim has always been mentioned in the conversation, but it's quite rare that you see multiple pros come out shortly after one another and say, yeah, Ghost Crim was pretty much the highest peak that a COD player has ever been at, which I think you can definitely justify it, but Aix disagrees. Now, Aix, of course, played with Crim back then, and he says that he was better than Crim for pretty much all of that year. So if Crim was the best peak player ever, then it was actually Aix instead. Now, okay, is Aix being a bit delusional? I don't really think so. To be honest, I think that Aix's peak back then especially, he was unbelievable in Ghosts. He definitely gets disrespected and underrated. I think a large part of it is probably because at the time, that Complexity team, like, was hated, really, because they kept winning everything. OpTic fans are like, come on, are we not going to win one? I mean, they just would win every tournament, and it's not like OpTic fans or the community perception in general of Karma or Crimsix or Aix or TP was positive. People didn't like them. But then, of course, Crim and Karma go on to join OpTic, and then, you know, they get some positive direction from the OpTic fans, and therefore maybe people look back on, oh yeah, Black Ops 2, Karma, Ghost, Crimsix were really good, which is definitely true. But Aix, because he was always the villain and never kind of went to the other side in a way, maybe people don't look back on it the same way. If Aix had joined OpTic, I imagine that people would look more fondly today on Aix's Ghost season than they do, and, well, as they do for Crimsix, shall we say. So, is Aix right, though? Was he actually better than Crim? Aix was really good back then, and people talk about Aix kind of being like the aBeZy before aBeZy existed from an SMG perspective. Definitely gets underrepresented in terms of how good he was, in the same way that it's like with JCap, as far as I'm concerned. Like, JCap Black Ops 1 was also one of the best kind of like peak players ever, was unbelievable in that game, but people don't either remember or they don't, you know, maybe doesn't get the respect, and it is what it is. But, you know, there were some few players that probably deserve more of a mention in these conversations than they typically get. I know that Crim thought it was kind of funny. This guy says, stick Crim with 3 scrubs, and this isn't a debate. Scub is the GOAT, and Crim's like, oh, 2022 with, you know, Paulex, Kiers, and HyDra, whatever. Obviously, he's just joking around. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he's not, and he's talking about the start of the season with Clay and the other guys that didn't end up particularly well. This was an interesting comparison, actually, that PD put together here on, well, between Crim and Aix during that season. I guess you can look at overall KDs. It's not like KD is everything here as well, and it's kind of funny that at Champs, Aix had a 1.35, and yet that's red, because Crim had a 1.36. So that just goes to show kind of like the level, the complexity we're hitting at that time. But then you can consider roles, and you can say, well, you know, maybe Aix's Champs performance was better than Crim's Champs performance, but, you know, okay, Aix reckons that there was only one event here that Crim was better than him at, and the numbers don't necessarily paint that as the reality. So, you know, whatever you want to say, I thought it was an interesting conversation that was going on, but it was also a big conversation between Dashy and MettalZ. They talked about a lot of stuff over the last couple of days. This was crazy as well, I'm not going to lie. Dashy, here he is at the Hex quarters, I'm guessing, and he's just opening cases. He's ordering food as well on his phone. He gets this nice little deagle, and then he just decides, right, I'll open another case as I'm ordering food, and you know, here he goes onto his phone, and then he just pulls this beautiful bayonet law. Like, this cannot be a cheap knife at all. This has got to be one of the more expensive variations of the bayonet, because I love the bayonet. I think it's the best looking knife. Dashy Dashy clutched up on that, I suppose. I just looked it up. It's probably not quite as expensive as I thought, but it's still like, it's probably $1,000 knife, maybe a little bit lower, but something around that. Depends on the float. You guys who know CS will know what I'm talking about. Now, while the beta was going on and they were doing that OpTic Hangout thing the other day, Dashy and MettalZ just sat down and were discussing all sorts of stuff, and it was a great little thing, and it did make people wonder whether they should do like their own kind of podcast or something at some point. But they were giving thoughts on the state of practice in the game as it stands, and potentially changing the way it goes. Typically what's been happening is the pros will practice 6 days a week, and they'll take 1 day off. Quite often that day's been a Monday, just because usually on match day weekends, they'll obviously be playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and on those days, sometimes they're playing actual matches, sometimes they're scrimming other teams to warm them up for their matches, and then usually Monday, of course, when it's an event weekend, they're traveling back Monday or whatever, that's usually the day off that's taken. But Dashy says maybe 2 days off, or maybe MettalZ's opinion is just work Monday to Friday and then take the weekend off. Now, this doesn't mean don't play COD. I think that's a distinction we've got to make here, is that there's playing ranked, there's playing 8s, there's doing other things that are kind of for fun and less stressful, because the scrims and the VOD review, that's work. You've got to turn up, put in the hours with your team, and really concentrate the entire time. Communication, getting better. You've got to be locked in if you want to really improve while you're working in practice. And, you know, 2 sets of scrims takes a good few hours, plus VOD review, whatever else they want to do. You've got to be pretty focused up for that. Playing pubs or whatever, more hours on the game, I think, is, especially when it's just come out, is going to be a positive. But more hours scrimming with your team against other teams, I'm not necessarily sure that's so much the case. I definitely do think they have a point here. Dashy actually got to this discussion because they were talking about Karma and saying Karma's really good at the start of every game, but when it comes to putting in all the hours for scrims, he's just not willing to commit to that time. But Dashy's like, look, do we really need the scrim schedule that we have? Can we dial it back a little bit? And would that actually be beneficial for teams? And if OpTic, let's say, this season decided that, sure, let's only do 5 days of practice, let's limit it to only 2 sets of scrims per day, would that be beneficial or would that hurt them?
I think we scrim too much. Not gonna lie.
Oh no.
I think scrimming 6 days a week is...
Yeah, no. Honestly, I do think...
It's too much.
I mean, even athletes don't practice that much. I mean, you need time to rest.
And we're also... And we're not really... A lot of people like just think that maybe we're just playing just to like play, but we're not really just doing it just to pass time. Like, it's 150.
It should be 5 days a week. So you have weekends off. You should have weekends off. I'm sorry.
I think it should just be a random day in the middle of the weekday. That's what I think.
If every team is scrimming 5 days, like,
it's also good. I honestly think it's gonna help too, because
the pro demographics are 18 to 25. Like, I think you need 6 days compared to 5 is not going to make or break anything. It's going to be if every team is playing 5 days and everyone's playing the same amount of scrims, it's going to be the same. It's not like the extra day is making a player or a team that much better. It's really not. But I do think 5 days a week is fine. That way people can enjoy their weekends, have a little more rest time, because, dude, like, third sets took me out.
Oh, no, yeah.
Like, when I heard third set, I was miserable.
I think it's doing a lot more harm than good. A lot of people would just think the more you play, the better you get. I completely disagree. I think it's 1,000,000% all quality over quantity when it comes to scrimming, because especially if you're, let's say if you're not feeling 100% that day or whatever, and then you just play, and then like now you're messing up on a hill because now you're not playing as good, or somebody's feeling a little lower than usual, instead of just taking an off day and then everyone just resetting and then coming back the next day just fresher.
I think it's more of like a...
It's just like a...
I just think everyone's trying to prove that they're like dedicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like, bro, even...
Nah, you actually nailed it. You nailed it with
that. Because I mean, it was the way I felt. Like when I was, like before I retired, when my coaches said third set, I'd be thinking, that's miserable. Can we please not? But I'd say, okay, perfect, let's go.
Yeah, just like, because you don't want to be that one teammate.
Yeah, because you want to look like you're into it. And it's like, I wasn't, like, I'm not going to be like, no, let's chalk it. But in my head, I'm like, dude, this is not going to help that much. Like, we just had 2 great sets versus 2 top teams. Now you want me to go play an amateur team? Like, I'm sorry, but like, why would we not just get off and ride this high and then come back tomorrow confident?
100%. 100%.
So I think it's really interesting to think what other teams would think about this. I can already hear certain players saying, what's Dashy talking about? Like, the more time you put in, the better. You've got to be committed. And to be fair, we always hear at the end of the season, players are always talking about, oh, it's the final push, it's the extra push, and they'll be putting in extra time on the game, extra time in practice and scrims and everything. So it's like some teams will always go the extra mile, some players will always go the extra mile, and they will try and take it to the the next level. And there's an argument that says, well, if you can concentrate and be locked in for 2 sets of scrims, I can do it for 3 sets of scrims. I'm going to take advantage on that. Whereas, you know, what if your entire team can't? Is that really for the betterment of the team? Not necessarily. And I think in many sports, obviously, some sports are physical. You can't train all the day, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some sports, though, you could, but actually a lot of the players decide not to. This will be relevant for a very small percentage of you guys, but there's a sport called snooker, which is not particularly popular or known, I guess, outside of the UK, and it's obviously big in China, and it's big in Europe to some extent. But if you guys have been watching Stephen Hendry, who's one of the greatest ever, he's going around and he's like interviewing while playing a match or just a fun little frame against some of these great players. And for example, the world champion right now, Luca Brissell, he barely practices at all. Snooker is a game, and they know how to play the game, so it's not like there's anything massively new to learn, as there is when the new COD comes out. But Dashy's point was that towards the end of the year, there's not that much new you're learning. It's just about kind of practicing what you know. So let's just say snooker as an example. They know how to play snooker, and therefore Luca Brissell barely practices at all. Maybe a couple of hours a day, maybe he takes a couple of days off, maybe he takes a couple of weeks off, but he turns up to the tournament and he makes sure that he's confident going into it, and then he knows he's going to play his best when he gets there. And many other players do the same thing. They play maybe 2 hours a day of practice, something like that. And it's not like that's an incredibly physically demanding sport that would require, you know, you wouldn't have to stop after 2 hours like you could if you wanted. And I think also MettalZ's idea that, let's say you've played 2 sets of scrims and you've had a really good couple of sets of scrims. You've been really locked in, really focused as a team, concentrating, you know, improving on the things that you were talking about in the VOD review to work on during it. You've played 2 good teams. Let's say you've gone 5-3 map set or something, and then your coach says, hey, let's play a 3rd set against this amateur team. That is, I agree with MettalZ, probably going to be for the worst of that situation. You're probably better off getting off, playing 8, you know, streaming, having a good time, whatever, just chilling out a little bit. Playing COD, for sure. It's not like they should play less COD, because I think there will be a correlation between players, especially when it is a brand new game every year, playing more COD than less COD. But it's the focused practice that arguably you should do, you know, 4 to 5 hours of a few times a week, and that probably is going to be better than extending it. There's people that say that, you know, I've been trying to learn how to actually swing a golf club, at least respectably, to play on a decent level, and a lot of people say, well, let's say you go to the range, hit 100 balls. Let's say after hitting 60 balls, you're feeling really good. Your last 5 shots were fantastic. You're probably better off just leaving it there, because the further on you go, the less concentrated you're going to be, your swing's going to be a bit more tired, and those final few shots are not going to be as good, and you're going to think, well, actually, maybe I've regressed a little bit here, and my body isn't really quite in tune as it was several shots ago. But then there are some sports or games where people just put in absolutely all the time, and that is for the best, right? I mean, we see this here. I just found up a couple of tweets where people were talking about the final push or playing a 3rd set, for example, it was Morks was, which is always like, when you get to the 3rd set of scrims for the day, you've already played like 16 maps of really heavy concentration against top teams. Are you going to be at your best? Probably not. And okay, does that add a little bit of extra to the quality of your as a team? Maybe, but I think it could also detract from it. So what's your guys' perception on this? Because I know that some people will say, I could already see the comments, oh, you know, Dashy's just saying this so he could work less or whatever. And sure, I mean, at the end of the day, if you are going to say, let's do less practice, let's calm it down a bit, you've got to make sure, 100% guaranteed, you're there on time, you're there ready to go, you know, you're locked in, you've got your, you know, sleep schedule on point, got your nutrition on point, so you're actually going to be at your best during that time. And if you do actually get quality over quantity, then sure. But, you know, I guess that's the question on these teams. If they were to say, all right, let's take Wednesday, you know, let's take Wednesday off, let's take Sunday off, I don't know, like Monday they'll probably still do because it makes the most sense, but if they took like Monday, Thursday off or something, as Dashy was saying, and then the teams organise the practice on the other days, I don't think many teams would do this. OpTic and Dashy might think it's for the best. I don't know whether the other guys would agree. Does Kenny agree with this, or does he think that more time is better? I don't know. I don't think that Dashy's opinion will be replicated by all players. I'm sure many players feel something similar, but I think a lot of players would think, well, more scrims, more time, the better. And they might be right on a game that is, you know, you're continuing to evolve over the course of a year. So I'm very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Just one final thing to close out with here, actually. The beta comes out again today, and apparently there's a cheating account account or software or whatever that is just like they're just releasing it for free for everyone to test during the beta because the anti-cheating COD just doesn't exist. So apparently this PC beta is going to be absolutely riddled with cheaters, which is, well, not going to be a good experience, I imagine, but also maybe it will pressure Activision and the developers to actually figure this out because, yeah, if their beta is completely ruined by cheaters, it's clearly an absolute disaster. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.